as I grow older, I don't want to be one that complains more and more, but I want to be one that praises God more and more. All right, Psalm 71 is where we're at tonight. Psalm 71. So yesterday, my kids went to a school called Heritage Christian here in town. They've all graduated from there now, and about 9 years ago they had a 5K, and they asked me to run the 5K. And I thought that once my kids all left the school that I would be retired from having to help with the 5K. It didn't work out that way. They actually asked me to help kind of start the race and hand out the medals, and so if I have to help, then my wife has to help, So she was at the place. So the 5K was on Shunga Trail. We started at the Shunga, where we're having our church picnic here in a couple of weeks, and we started there. And then you run a mile and a half out. Or 5K is 3.1 miles, so you run 1.55 out, and then you turn around and come back. And so I stuck Karen in the middle of the woods at Shunga Trail at the turnaround spot. She handed out a thing of water, and so this is where people knew they'd turn around. So the race is going. About 30 minutes had passed, and I said, well, I'm going to go get my wife and bring her back. So I drove kind of as far as I could go, and then I got on the trail, and I'm walking to get Karen. So we have a 5K, and then we also have a fun run. And the fun run is a mile. So you go a half mile out, come a half mile back. A lot of little kids do that. Well, there was this little kid who's 5 years old who, when we started the 5K, thought that was the fun run, and he just took off. And he ran past the half mile thing, and he got all the way to where Karen was at. And he's turned around and come. So I'm walking to Karen on Shunga Trail, and this little 5-year-old kid who has an HCS 5K shirt on, he's walking back, and I'm just kind of shocked that this 5-year-old is by himself on Shunga Trail in like one of the worst spots you could be. So I'm like, hey, kid. I didn't know his name. I said, what's your name? And he goes, well, my name's Isaiah. And I'm like, well, this kid should not be telling me his name. He doesn't know who I am. And so I carried up. I said, are you running the? He goes, I'm running. I said, are you running the 5K? And he goes, well, yeah. And so I'm like very concerned. So I walk back with him. I'll walk back with you. And so I called Karen and says, I'm not going to come get you. You're going to have to, good luck. And so we were walking that. So we got in this conversation. And I said, Isaiah, how old are you? And that's how I found out. He says, he said, I'm 5. And he said, well, how old are you? And I said, I'm 47. And this is exactly what he said. Wow, that's old. Little 5-year-old, wow, that's old, And I thought that was really ironic because I'm talking about being old tonight in our text. Because this is what Psalm 71 is about. It's about kind of getting old. And so you young people that are in the room, you're like, well, this doesn't have anything to do with me. Well, this is what stinks. You will get old. It is coming. And so you ought to take notes and file them away for about 50 years. And then you can pull them out and then remember what we talk about tonight. But this is an important passage because the psalmist is getting old. And remember what I said to you early on, that the Psalms they're different books to teach us how to pray. And that's what this book is. That's what this chapter is. This is a chapter that teaches us how to pray as we're getting older. And we all are getting older, and we can debate about what makes a person old. I was reading some stuff this week, where I think we tend to think of it as retirement and that kind of thing. But man, that's just, I don't think that's old at all. In fact, I think that one of the failures in our society a little bit is that we have kind of defined what old is. We live in a culture where the world seems to worship youth and is terrified of aging. But the reality is that there was a time where getting older was associated with wisdom and experience. In fact, some of the greatest accomplishments in history came very late in life. Immanuel Kant wrote one of his best philosophical works at the age of 74. Verdi penned his classic Ave Maria at age 85. Michelangelo was 87 when he completed what some consider to be his greatest work of art. Ronald Reagan was the most powerful man in the world at the age of 75. And James Dotson wrote a lot about this. He says that the notion that we should be winding down at 50 or 60 in years of age is just crazy. And in fact, even if you look at the Bible, you'll see that some of the people that God used the greatest were older. Moses was not 80 years, he was 80 years old when he began to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Abraham was a classic example of that. He had his first kid at 100, or at 90, and Sarah was 100. So this idea that, well, I'm getting old and I can't do what I used to do, and I may be limited physically. There is a reality to that, but it doesn't mean that I should stop winding down. I think a great example of that was John Wesley, who was an evangelist. John Wesley is a good example of serving God in one's latter years or senior years. In Wesley's life, now this is before cars and the public transportation that we have. In Wesley's life, he rode 350,000 miles on horseback preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. He preached some 40,000 different sermons. As he grew older, at the age of 83, he complained because he could only study for 15 hours a day. At 83. At the age of 86, he became concerned about his spiritual state because he felt that he had become slothful by sleeping in till 5 a.m. At 87, he learned his 11th foreign language. And at 88, he was worried because he could only preach twice a day, every day, 6 days a week. Another great evangelist, George Mueller, is said to have traveled 200,000 miles using his linguistic ability to preach in several different languages to an estimated 3 million people around the world. However, Mueller's statistics only began after his 70th birthday and continued for the next 17 years. So they didn't even start keeping tracks on how much he traveled till after he turned 70. Take it from these guys, you're never too old to be of service to the Lord. So, I think that we need to be careful about, I'm just too old to do stuff for the Lord. Well, the psalmist here would disagree. And in the psalm here, we have a writer that is getting older, but he is praying a prayer to God. And this is what, as all of us begin to age and we get older, we need to pray this prayer. So let's begin reading in verse number 1, and then I'll kind of stop at different points and talk to you about what we should pray. So 1, in you, O Lord, I put my trust. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness and cause me to escape. Incline your ear to me and save me. Be my strong refuge to which I may resort continually. You have given the commandment to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. Deliver me, O my God, out of the hand of the wicked, out of the hand of the unrighteous man and cruel man. For you are my hope, O Lord God. You are my trust from my youth. By you I have been upheld from birth. You are he who took me out of my mother's womb. My praise shall be continually of you. So 1, the first thing that I pray as I begin to age is, Lord, help me never to forget. Lord, help me never forget. Old age is a gift. Just say that again for those of you that are like, I don't agree with that. I do believe that old age is a gift, because what does it mean? Old age means that I have had long experience of God's presence, faithfulness, and blessings. It means that I can look back on my life and I can point to situation after situation after situation after situation and say, God was faithful. God was good. God was present. God worked in this situation. But what happens to us a lot of times, and whether we're young or we're old, we tend to focus on the immediate. And we just think about what's going on right now and what we're experiencing right now. And one of the things that if we're not careful about is we will forget the goodness of God. because maybe we're getting up in age, and maybe our body doesn't work like it used to, and maybe we don't feel as strong as we used to, and maybe we don't have the relationships we used to have. So the temptation is to think that this is who God is, and we forget the faithfulness of God over all these years and how He has provided for me and how He's taken care of me and how He has been kind to me and how He has blessed me. And so one of the prayers should be, Lord, help me never to forget. And that's the psalmist. He is revisiting his young years. He is revisiting his youth. He is thinking about that time where he was a child and how God blessed him and how God worked in his life and how God formed him in his mother's womb, and he says, my praise shall continually be of you. So the prayer should be, Lord, help me never to forget. Even when I begin to go through difficulties, even when I begin to go through challenges, and it is a blessing to live old. It means that God has been faithful to you for a long time. And how many of us have said, man, that person died way too young? Or that person, and if you get to an older age, you can look back and say, man, God's given me a full life. God's given me a good life. So Lord, help me never to forget what you have done. Verse number 7 then continues kind of the thought. He says, I have become as a wanderer to many, but you are my strong refuge. Let my mouth be filled with your praise and with your glory all the day. Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Do not forsake me when my strength fails. For my enemies speak against me, and those who lie in wait for me take counsel together, saying, God has forsaken him. Pursue and take him, for there is none to deliver him. So he's obviously kind of going through a difficult time, right? He's experiencing some fears. So what does he say in verse number 12? O God, do not be far from me. O my God, make haste to help me. So the second thing that I want to pray as I age is, Lord, when I have fears, give me faith. Lord, when I have fears, give me faith. One of the negatives, I would say, about growing older is it seems to be we're more scared of stuff. I mean, when you're young, you're scared of nothing, right? I mean, you ever seen your kids do something and you're like, what were you thinking? Well, they weren't. They don't have the experience of, oh, this may cost me pain. But what happens is sometimes we get so much information in our head that it can cause us to fear. We can process so much information that we overthink things. And we live our lives not by faith, but by fear. And the psalmist here is kind of wrestling with that. He's got enemies coming up against him. And he is afraid of this enemy. But he is saying, God, help me not to give in to my fears, but give me faith to trust me that you're going to deliver me through this. And that needs to be a constant prayer of us. We don't want to become consumed with our prayers. And I find that, as somebody that is aging, I started this church when I was 28 years old. I wasn't scared of anything, in the sense that it was kind of like, well, it's 28. I got my whole life in front of me. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. At least I tried. We get like 47, we're like, well, I don't know if we ought to do anything because it might blow up. Right? We kind of get this attitude of, we stop taking risks, we stop stepping out on faith, and I don't think that's any way to live. Not to be consumed by our fears. But I do find myself, though, as I am getting older, that the fears of this world and the concerns of this world, make me, they cause a lot more anxiety than they used to in the past. And so I have to constantly be praying, God, help me not listen to my fears, but help me to trust you in faith. I watched this situation with that happened this week where, you have the bombing in Syria, and then you have, I go to this website called Drudge Report, and it's like Russian warships are on the move. And I'm like, man, are we walking into World War III? And so then there's this pit in my stomach, and I'm like, you go to bad places sometimes in your head, and that's just fear. So do I believe God's sovereign or not? Do I believe God's working or not? Do we believe God's in control or not? Because that's what faith is. Faith is, I trust in God in spite of all of this that I see going on around me. Front page, the Capital Journal today. One of the hospitals may shut down. 1,600 people may lose their jobs. Well, what's that going to do to our economy? You know, how does that affect the church? You know, who works at the church at that hospital, and what's going to happen, you know? God's proven himself to be pretty faithful over the years. But it's easy to kind of lock into those fears. And so as I grow older, God, when I have fears, give me faith. Don't become consumed by your fears. And that's what the psalmist is praying. Verse 13, let them be confounded and consumed who are adversaries of my life. Let them be covered with reproach and dishonor who seek my hurt. But I will hope continually and will praise you yet more and more. Number 3, Lord, instead of complaining, keep me praising. Lord, instead of complaining, keep me praising. It is kind of a characteristic sometimes of us as we get older, is that we can maybe complain more and more. No, they don't make it like they used to. And I mean, kind of this attitude of just kind of complaining about this and that and this situation and that situation. Because you have more experience, you have a bigger range, and you have maybe seen when things were better. But I think there's this, we can, if we're not careful, we can kind of develop this attitude of complaining. And the psalmist here is saying, as I grow older, I don't want to be one that complains more and more, but I want to be one that praises God more and more. The greatest worshipers in our church should be the old people. Right? Because they have experienced the most of God. Like if you have a relationship with somebody, like I have known Karen since she was 5 and I was 3. We have been married for a lot of years. 20 plus, 25 plus, 26, right? Okay, so 26 years. We've been together 26 years. I should be more in love with her than I am with anybody else in the room, right? Because I have been with her more than I've been with anybody else. I've had a relationship with her longer than I've had a relationship with anybody. So we ought to be the closest. If you have hypothetically walked with God for 65 years, he should be the greatest treasure of your life. So when your mouth comes open and you talk about God, what should come out of your mouth is praise. Because he's been nothing but kind and good and generous and merciful to me and to you. So, Lord, help me as I get to having problems and I get to facing adversity and life gets tough. Help me not to complain, but help me to praise that I got you by my side. And that's what I believe the psalmist is doing here. I will hope continually, and I will praise you yet more and more. The longer I walk with you, Jesus. What's that old song? The longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows. That's an old song years ago. It gets sweeter and sweeter. And that's why I get worried about people who say that they have walked with Jesus for a long time, but gripe all the time. Who you been walking with? Because it ain't been God. Because if God is as great as you say he is, why are we complaining all the time instead of praising him all the time for what he's doing? So Lord, instead of complaining, keep me praising. Let's read on. My mouth shall tell of your righteousness and your salvation all the day, for I do not know their limits. I will go in the strength of the Lord God. I will make mention of your righteousness, of yours only. Number 4, Lord, as we get older, pray this. Lord, give me the strength to keep serving. Lord, give me the strength to keep serving. I get it, folks, that as you get older, you lose the strength that you once had. So Sundays can be exhausting for me, and I always know how hard I preached or how hard I've worked on Sunday based on how many naps I take on Monday. So if I work really hard and I preached really hard, and it's usually, like I'll tell Karen, this is a 2-nap day. You take a nap in the middle of the morning, and you take a nap in the middle of the afternoon, and it's like it's a 2-nap day. And I didn't do that when I was 28. I didn't do that when I was younger. So obviously something's changing in my body. I am getting stinking sick and tired of trying to work out and exercise and something not blowing up all the time. Right? Like I was doing really good. I've been doing this exercise program for a month. And then Monday of this week, I did this exercise program. And my left knee, which is not the one that was operated on, the one that was operated on is the right knee, my left knee has been giving me fits all week. And I'm like, come on, Lord. Now, I know you guys think that's stupid, but can you relate? So it's kind of like, can we do one thing without blowing something up? Can we just, and so I get it that we don't have the strength that we used to have, but can I just challenge you? Don't stop serving God. Don't stop serving God. God is not done with you, even if you are older. I like what Albert McDaniel said. He says, as you retire from your secular job, you need not retire from your spiritual job. You can stay in the forefront of the battle, working for the master. Retirement may actually present you with the time and opportunity to be of greater service than ever before. Some might say, but I am too old for that. But service in God's army has no age limit. Moses was 80 years old when he began to lead Israel. Abraham was 75 years of age as he obeyed God's command to leave Haran and serve him in the land of Canaan. So as McDaniel has shown us, we are never too old to serve the Lord, and we can definitely never retire from serving us. None of us have served our time when it comes to work in God's kingdom. So pray, Lord, as my physical strength begins to decline, give me the strength to keep serving you. Don't ever retire from serving Jesus. And that's the psalmist here is he's asking God for strength so that he can make mention of your righteousness of yours only. Verse 17. O God, you have taught me from my youth. So he's an older guy. You have taught me from my youth. And to this day I declare your wondrous works. Now also, when I am old and gray-headed, O God, do not forsake me until I declare your strength to this generation, your power to everyone who is to come. Now that is an important verse right there. Because notice what he says. He says, I am old and gray-headed, do not forsake me. And what does he want to do? Until I declare your strength to this generation. So the fifth thing is, Lord, help me to magnify you to the younger generation. Lord, help me to magnify you to the younger generation. I understand that the current generation that is coming up, the millennials, do not do things like you do. And I think that there are some terrible labels going around about millennials, and I think that we are making a mistake in how we're treating them. In the sense that we are, especially older people, I'm talking about myself, my generation, or older than me, we're kind of looking down on millennials, and we're treating them incorrectly. You are not to despise the younger generation. You are to minister to the younger generation. Because if the younger generation is not ministered to, then the church has no future. We are one generation away from collapse. So I don't want to look down my nose at the younger generation. I want to minister to them. One of the greatest things that you can do as an older person is to invest in somebody that is younger than you. Be a mentor. Help somebody. Yes, does the younger generation have a lot of issues? Absolutely. Does your generation have a lot of issues? Absolutely. I had a very frank conversation with a guy this week. I had a wedding on Friday from a couple that goes to our church, and you know, there's some terrifying stats out there about the millennial generation and their relationship to God and as far as their activity in the church. And this guy I was talking to, he's 31 years old. He's kind of in and out of church, and so he said, why do you think that my generation doesn't have much to do with God? And I said, my theory, and this is my theory, okay, my theory is that there's a lot of people that grew up in my age, that grew up in a home where there was an appearance of righteousness, but it was not lived out at home. There was hypocrisy. So it's like, you do right, but then they didn't do right. And so the kids are like, well, if that's the version of Christianity, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm not going to go do something I don't think is right. I've lived the hypocrite all my life. I'm not going to be a hypocrite too. I think what the world needs is authentic Christianity. So, look, my generation made a lot of mistakes with our kids. We made a lot of mistakes. Those kids are coming up. They're going to make some mistakes, but man, we can't despise that older generation. Oh, them young whippersnappers. Well, them young whippersnappers are needed. We need to invest in younger kids, invest in younger people. And this is what he's praying. He's saying, oh God, what does he want to do when he is old and gray-headed? I want to declare your strength to this generation. God is as great as the word says he is. So let's not be fighting the generation below us. Let's be exalting Jesus to the generation below us. Let's be lifting up his name. Let's be magnifying the word of God. Let's do our part. Let's not be constantly at war. I mean, I just see this. I see this barrage on Facebook of just kind of putting everything down, putting the next generation down. That's not going to help reach them. It's kind of like we talked about this morning. It's like wrath does not produce the righteousness of God. And constantly putting the next generation down is not going to help reach them for Christ. So Lord, as I grow older, help me to magnify you to this younger generation. For the older generation, sometimes the past was the best. But let's not give up on our kids. Not give up on our kids. Then if you read verse 19, also your righteousness, O God, is very high. Who has done great things, O God? Who is like you? You who have shown me great and severe troubles shall revive me again and bring up again from the depths of the earth. You shall increase my greatness and comfort me on every side. And with the lute I will praise you, and with your faithfulness, O my God, to you I will sing with the harp, O Holy One of Israel. My lips shall greatly rejoice when I sing to you, and my soul which you have redeemed. My tongue also shall talk of your righteousness all the day long. For they are confounded, for they are brought to shame who seek my hurt. I like what he says in verse number 19. Also your righteousness, O God, is very high. Who has done great things? O God, who is like you? Number 6, Lord, keep me passionate about you. Now, what is a lot of times the younger generation have that that kind of drives us crazy, or that, you know, they have passion, but they don't have perspective. So they're like, let's run through a wall and not think of the consequences. I mean, they don't have perspective. They just have passion. Let's go. Okay? But what can happen, though, as we get older is we can gain perspective. And I do love that about getting older. I mean, when this church was in its infant stages, I used to worry about everything. Now I don't worry about so much. I just worry about half the things. Right? But I have perspective because what? I have 19 years of history of God taking care of us. Same thing is true in my family. I remember when my kids were little, I used to just pray, oh God, just please help me to be able to provide for them until they get out of the house. Okay, well, it's worked out. God's been faithful. God's taken care of our needs. Our kids have never gone without. So now I see somebody and they're in their infant stages and they have little kids running around their house and man, they come and they talk to me and they're like, I don't know if we can make it. I just want to tell them, you can make it. Just hold on. Do the best you can. Keep pointing them to the Lord. You can make it. We made it. You can make it too. God will take care of you. He'll take care of your kids. But what happens sometimes as we get older is while we have perspective, we lose the passion. So I want to pray, God, keep me passionate about you. You know, you see a young couple and they're in love and they're all in each other's face and, you know, and you're older and you've been married for 40 years and you just, oh, chill out. I want to always stay passionate. I want to have a great love for my wife, and I want to have great love for my kids. I want to be passionate about my relationship with her. I want to be passionate about my relationship with my kids. I want to be passionate about my relationship with Jesus Christ. But the great thing about being old is you got perspective, and you can be passionate with perspective. But what I see a lot of times is as we get older, we lose our passion. So I want to pray, God, keep me passionate. Keep my heart tender. I mean, honestly, when's the last time you just cried because you were so moved by what God had done? You know, your heart was tender. I was just thinking about walking with Isaiah yesterday and the sheer innocence of that little kid. He obviously hasn't been hurt. He's obviously got a good family. He's obviously been raised well in the sense that he's out. I mean, he hasn't had the difficulties of life. You know, and you say, well, he just doesn't understand responsibility. But there's a lot that we can learn from kids. And just that passion and that joy for life. And that's what the psalmist is praying. God, always keep me passionate for you. I should never think about the love of God and make me want to yawn. I mean, remember when you realized for the first time that God loved you and gave his son for you? May we never lose that passion, even as we grow older. So these are some prayers we should pray. And I think that this is what the psalmist is praying here. God, help me never forget. Help me never forget. God, when I have fears, give me faith. I understand that there's a lot of fears that come with getting old. The fear of being left alone, the fear of being a burden to loved ones, the fear of becoming a helpless invalid, the fear of losing one's grip, the fearing of being imposed upon. There's all of these fears. But God, help me when I feel these fears to give me faith that you're going to care for me. Lord, when I'm tempted to complain, help me keep praising. Lord, when I am losing my physical strength and it's going kind of day by day, but Lord, give me the strength to serve you. And Lord, help me not to despise the younger generation, but to minister to them. Help me to mentor them and help them. You know, I was watching a video today, and it was talking about millennials, you know, and how millennials have been raised in this environment where they have always been told that they're special, and and yet they get out in the workforce and they find out they're not so special. And so the guy was saying, look, we need older, we don't need to despise that generation. We need to invest in them and teach them that things come by patience. Things take a while. Just love on them, care for them, be honest with them, tell them the truth. Be there to pick them up when they feel disillusioned. Help me not to despise that younger generation, though. And I want to challenge every one of you that's older. Who are you investing in that's a younger person? Don't just be the grandparent that gives the kids all that they want, the grandkids. Invest in those kids. This is what my parents aren't here today. Many of you have asked about them. My brother is actually adopting 3 kids tomorrow morning. So they're in Kentucky to be a part of that adoption. We're very excited for the family. But I want to tell you something that I'm grateful for every summer we would take our kids. My parents lived in Texas and we lived here. We would take them to Texas for a week. We would meet them in Oklahoma. We would switch cars and they would spend a week with my kids. You know, my kids would come back learning Bible verses. I mean, my mom just didn't take them to the zoo, although my parents took them to the zoo and really took care of them and gave them, but they also, my mother taught my kids the Bible. She invested in my dad invested in my kids. He didn't just see his job as a grandpa to be somebody that just gives kids what they want, but he invested in my kids. And I'm eternally grateful to them for that. So those of you that have grandkids, invest in them, not just giving them stuff, but spend time with them. I talked to a girl the other day. She said some of the greatest memories I have and some of the greatest lessons I learned in life were riding in a truck with my grandfather. Just listening to him talk. And that should be our prayer. Lord, help me to magnify. Always be investing in the younger generation. And then let's pray, Lord, keep me passionate about you. Keep me in love with you. Help that love never to wane, but help me to stay passionate. Yeah, I got perspective. Yeah, things may not work out. Yeah, I've seen things not, but I'm loved by God and I love God. I never want that to go away. Amen.